She stood on the edge, eyes shut, ready to jump, when a filthy stray dog placed something at her feet. She opened her eyes and dropped to her knees. The forest was silent except for the soft crunch of leaves beneath Emma's feet. Thin beams of sunlight pierced through the canopy, creating dappled patterns on the forest floor. She moved with purpose, her backpack heavy against her shoulders, containing only the essentials: a water bottle, some food, a blanket, her journal, and the bottle of pills. She had chosen this spot carefully, far enough from hiking trails that no well-meaning stranger would interrupt her final moments, but not so remote that her body would never be found. Emma had always been considerate, even now. At 28, she had methodically disconnected herself from life over the past few months. She'd quit her job at the publishing house, citing burnout. She'd slowly withdrawn from her few friends, making excuses about needing space. She'd donated most of her possessions, telling her apartment manager she was moving abroad. She'd written letters to her estranged parents and her brother, explaining as best she could that this wasn't their fault. The pain had simply become too much to bear. The weight of her depression had been a constant companion for years, but after David's death, it had become unbearable. Her fiancé's sudden heart attack 10 months ago had shattered what little resilience she had left. The world, once merely gray and difficult, had become entirely empty of meaning. Emma found the clearing she'd scouted last week. A fallen log beside a small stream provided a perfect seat. She'd envisioned ending things here, with the gentle sound of water accompanying her as she slipped away. There was a poetic rightness to it that appealed to the writer in her. She unshouldered her backpack and sat down, exhaling deeply as she looked around at the beauty she'd soon leave behind. The afternoon light gave everything a golden quality. Emma opened her journal, intending to write her final thoughts. She'd already composed most of her goodbye note, but wanted to capture these last moments, these final impressions of Earth before she left it. As she uncapped her pen, she hesitated. What could she possibly say that would matter now? A rustling sound from the undergrowth startled her. Emma froze, pen hovering above the blank page. She hadn't anticipated company. The noise grew closer, branches snapping under something heavier than a squirrel. Her heart raced. A bear, a deer, either would be an unwelcome complication to her carefully laid plans. What emerged from the bushes, however, was neither. A dog, thin and dirty, limped into the clearing. It was medium-sized, with matted fur that might have once been golden. One of its front paws was held slightly above the ground, clearly injured. The animal stopped when it saw Emma, its body tensing as if preparing to flee. "Hey there," Emma said softly, surprised to hear her own voice. She hadn't spoken aloud to anyone in days. The dog regarded her warily, keeping its distance. Its eyes, a deep amber color, seemed to hold a strange intelligence as they assessed her. Emma noticed a nasty gash on its shoulder, crusted with dried blood and dirt. "You're hurt," she observed unnecessarily. The dog made no move to approach, but didn't retreat either. It stood at the edge of the clearing, watching her with those intelligent eyes. Emma hesitated, then reached into her backpack and pulled out her sandwich. She unwrapped it and broke off a piece of turkey, holding it out. "Are you hungry? It's okay. I won't hurt you." The dog's ears perked up at the sight of food, but it remained cautious, shifting its weight from one paw to another. Emma placed the piece of meat on the ground between them and scooted back on the log, giving the animal space. Hunger eventually overcame caution. The dog limped forward, snatched the turkey with surprising gentleness, then retreated a few steps to eat it. Emma offered another piece, and this time the dog took less time to approach. "You're all alone out here, huh?" Emma said conversationally. "Me too." The absurdity of the situation suddenly struck her. Here she was, having come to the forest to end her life, and instead she was feeding sandwich pieces to a stray dog. She almost laughed at the cosmic joke of it all. The dog finished the last bit of turkey and looked at her expectantly. Emma shook her head. "Sorry, that's all I've got." To her surprise, the dog didn't leave. Instead, it carefully approached the log where she sat and lowered itself to the ground a few feet away, wincing slightly as it adjusted its injured paw. It laid its head on its uninjured front leg, still watching her. "I'm not really good company right now," Emma told it. The dog blinked slowly in response. Emma returned to her journal, but the words still wouldn't come. The presence of the dog had disrupted the solemnity of the moment. She glanced at her watch. She'd planned to take the pills as the sun began to set, giving herself one last sunset. There was still time. The dog whimpered softly, shifting its position. Emma noticed its injured paw was bleeding slightly, probably reopened by its movement through the forest. Without thinking, she reached for her water bottle and the small first aid kit she'd packed in case she changed her mind about the pills and needed to hike back out. "Let me help," she said, moving slowly toward the dog. It watched her approach with caution but didn't growl or try to run. Emma poured some water onto her bandana and gently reached for the dog's paw. To her surprise, it allowed her to touch it, only flinching slightly when she dabbed at the wound. "You've got a thorn or something in there," she murmured, examining the paw. "Hold still." With careful fingers, Emma extracted a sharp, jagged piece of glass from the pad of the dog's paw. The animal whimpered but remained still, as if understanding she was helping. Blood welled up after the glass was removed, and Emma pressed a clean portion of the bandana against it. "You should probably see a vet," she said, wrapping the makeshift bandage around the paw. "But this should help for now." The dog licked her hand when she finished, a gesture that sent an unexpected wave of emotion through Emma. When was the last time she'd touched another living being? When was the last time she'd helped someone else? The simple connection, animal though it was, made her throat tighten. Emma returned to the log, and to her surprise, the dog followed, settling closer this time. She reached out hesitantly and stroked its head. The fur was dirty but soft, and the dog leaned into her touch, closing its eyes briefly in apparent contentment. "What happened to you?" she asked softly. "Did someone leave you out here? Or did you run away?" The dog had no collar, no tags. Its condition suggested it had been on its own for some time, but it was clearly used to humans. A lost pet, perhaps, or an abandoned one. The minutes stretched into an hour as Emma sat stroking the dog's head, occasionally checking the bandage on its paw. The animal's presence had an oddly calming effect. For the first time in months, Emma's thoughts weren't consumed by her pain. Instead, she wondered about the dog's story, about how it had survived alone in the forest, about where it had come from, and where it might go. The sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in deepening shades of orange and pink. The time Emma had set for herself was approaching. She looked down at the dog, now dozing lightly beside her, and felt a twinge of something unfamiliar. Not happiness exactly, but a pull away from the emptiness that had driven her here. She reached for her backpack and her fingers brushed against the bottle of pills. The dog lifted its head, amber eyes meeting hers, as if it could sense the weight of the moment. Emma hesitated, her hand still on the backpack. The animal whined softly and nudged her arm with its nose. "What am I supposed to do?" she whispered. "I came here to die." The dog stood, shaking itself, and limped a few steps toward the forest before turning back to look at her. It barked once, a clear, sharp sound that echoed through the clearing. "You want me to follow you?" Emma asked. As if in answer, the dog barked again, then waited, its injured paw held carefully above the ground. Emma looked at her backpack, at her journal with its unwritten final page, at the setting sun. The plan had been so clear this morning. Now, with this unexpected companion watching her expectantly, Everything felt uncertain. Emma stood, leaving the backpack on the log. "Just for a little while," she told the dog. "Then I'll come back." The dog seemed to understand, leading her slowly along the stream, pausing occasionally to make sure she followed. Emma found herself wondering where they were going, a small spark of curiosity breaking through the fog of her depression. It wasn't much, but it was something she hadn't felt in a very long time. As they walked deeper into the forest, the dog limping bravely ahead, Emma realized with a start that her plan for the evening had shifted. She would not be taking those pills, at least not tonight. Tonight she would follow this strange, wounded creature who had appeared from nowhere and without words asked for her help. Tomorrow was still unwritten, but for now, that would have to be enough. The dog led Emma along the stream, its pace slowed by the injured paw, but its determination unwavering. As they moved deeper into the forest, the trees grew thicker, blocking out the setting sun and casting long shadows across their path. Emma found herself wondering if she was making a terrible mistake following a stray animal into unfamiliar territory as darkness approached. Yet something kept her going. Perhaps curiosity, perhaps simply the novelty of feeling anything other than the crushing emptiness that had become her constant companion. After 15 minutes of walking, the stream widened into a small, secluded pond. The dog stopped at the water's edge and looked back at Emma, then lowered its head to drink. The sight was oddly serene, the still water reflecting the pink-streaked sky, the injured animal drinking peacefully. Emma realized she was thirsty too, but her water bottle remained in the backpack she'd left behind. "Is this what you wanted to show me?" she asked. "A pond?" The dog finished drinking and shook its head, spraying water droplets that caught the fading light. It limped around the edge of the pond and continued into the forest. Emma hesitated. The sun was setting rapidly now, and she hadn't brought a flashlight. She should go back, retrieve her backpack, either complete her original plan or hike back to civilization. The dog stopped and barked again, that same sharp, insistent sound. Okay, Emma sighed, but not much farther. Another 5 minutes of walking brought them to a small structure nestled among the trees. At first glance, it appeared to be nothing more than a pile of fallen logs and debris. As they got closer, however, Emma realized it was the remains of a small cabin, long abandoned and partially reclaimed by nature. The roof had partially collapsed, and vines crawled up the walls, but the basic structure was intact. The dog approached the cabin's doorway, which hung askew on a single rusted hinge. It turned to Emma and barked again, more urgently this time. "You live here?" Emma approached cautiously, peering into the dim interior. The cabin was a single room, maybe 15 feet square. Debris littered the floor, leaves, broken furniture, what looked like animal droppings. But in one corner, Emma could make out what appeared to be a nest of sorts, a collection of old blankets and clothing arranged in a rough circle, a dog's bed. As her eyes adjusted to the dimness, Emma noticed other things. A plastic water bowl, its blue color faded but still visible beneath a layer of dirt. A chewed tennis ball, a frayed rope toy. Someone had lived here with a dog, or had at least used the cabin as a shelter for one. The stray limped to the nest and turned in a circle before carefully lying down, amber eyes still fixed on Emma. It was clearly at home here. "Who brought you here?" Emma asked, looking around for signs of human habitation. There was an old wood stove in one corner, its pipe disconnected and rusting. A crude shelf on one wall held a few dented cans and what looked like a first aid kit. Near the dog's nest lay something that made Emma's breath catch, a faded photograph in a simple wooden frame. She picked it up carefully, wiping away dust with her sleeve. The photo showed a smiling older man with a full white beard, his arm around a much younger version of the dog now watching her. In the picture, the dog's coat was clean and golden, its stance proud beside its owner. "Is this your person?" Emma asked softly, showing the photo to the dog. Its tail thumped once against the blankets. Emma set the photo down and continued exploring the small space. On another shelf, she found a leather-bound journal, its pages warped from humidity but still intact. She opened it carefully, feeling a twinge of guilt at invading someone's privacy even as curiosity drove her forward. The journal belonged to someone named Marcus Harrison. The earliest entry was dated 3 years ago. "Moved into the cabin today. It's more run down than I expected, but it will serve my purposes. Solitude, silence, simplicity. The necessities for healing, according to Dr. Phillips. We shall see." Emma flipped through the pages. The entries documented Marcus's life in the forest, his struggles to repair the cabin, his observations of wildlife, his gradual adjustment to solitude. 2 months into his stay, a new character appeared in the narrative. "Found a puppy today, half-starved and shivering by the stream. No collar, no signs of ownership, likely abandoned. I've named him Charlie, after my father. Having another heartbeat in this cabin changes everything. I came here to escape humanity, yet find myself grateful for companionship, even of the 4-legged variety." Emma looked up from the journal to the dog, Charlie, who watched her with those intelligent eyes. "Charlie," she said experimentally. The dog's ears perked up, confirming his name. She returned to the journal, reading more of Marcus's entries. His relationship with Charlie featured prominently, the dog becoming not just a companion, but a reason to keep going, to establish routines, to venture beyond the safety of the cabin. Marcus's writing, initially clinical and detached, grew warmer, occasionally even humorous, as he documented Charlie's antics and their life together. The entries continued regularly until about 6 months ago, when they became sporadic, the handwriting increasingly shaky. The final entry was dated just over a month ago. "Charlie knows something is wrong, hasn't left my side in days. The pain is worse and the medicine is almost gone. I should have gone back to the city weeks ago, but the thought of hospitals, of sterile rooms and pitying faces. No. Better to end here, where I found some measure of peace. My only regret is Charlie. I've left enough food for a month. He knows how to push open the door, how to find water. He's smart and strong. Perhaps someone will find him. If you are reading this and Charlie is still alive, please take care of him. He saved me in all the ways that matter, gave me 2 years I might otherwise not have had. He deserves a good home." Emma closed the journal, her throat tight. She looked at Charlie, understanding now why he was alone, why the cabin felt recently abandoned, despite its state of disrepair. His owner had died here, probably in this very room, with only Charlie to witness his passing. "You've been alone for weeks," she said softly. Charlie whined in response, his tail thumping weakly against the blankets again. Emma noticed now how thin he was beneath the matted fur, how his ribs showed when he breathed. The month's worth of food Marcus had left was long gone. Outside, darkness had fallen completely. Emma knew she should feel afraid, alone in a forest, night closing in, sheltering in an abandoned cabin with a strange dog. Instead, she felt an odd sense of purpose stirring within her. Charlie needed help. He was injured, hungry, alone, just like her. The irony wasn't lost on Emma. She had come to the forest to die and instead had found a creature desperately trying to survive. She looked around the cabin again, this time with practical eyes. The roof, though damaged, would provide some shelter if it rained. The blankets in Charlie's nest were dirty but usable. If she could get the wood stove working, they might have heat. "I should go back for my backpack," she told Charlie. "I have food, water, but it's too dark now. I'd never find my way." Charlie seemed to understand, settling deeper into his nest with a sigh. Emma sat down on the floor beside him, her back against the wall. The night would be long and uncomfortable, but for the first time in months, her thoughts weren't consumed by her own pain. Instead, she found herself planning what Charlie would need, how to help him recover, what they would do when morning came. As the cabin grew darker, Emma reached out to stroke Charlie's head. His fur was filthy, but the gentle rhythm of petting him soothed her as much as it seemed to comfort him. His breathing gradually slowed, and he fell asleep beside her, trusting despite everything he'd been through. Emma leaned her head back against the wall, surprisingly unafraid in this strange place. She thought of her backpack, still sitting on that log by the stream, the bottle of pills inside it. She thought of Marcus Harrison, who had come to the forest seeking solitude and found instead a reason to live a little longer. She thought of Charlie, who had lost everything, yet still had the courage to approach a stranger to lead her here to trust. Tomorrow she would need to make decisions. But tonight, in this abandoned cabin with this wounded animal, Emma allowed herself to simply be, not happy, not healed, but present. And for now, that was enough. Emma woke with a start, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. Sunlight streamed through the gaps in the cabin's damaged roof, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air. Her neck ached from sleeping upright against the wall, and her mouth felt dry. For a second, panic gripped her. Where was she? Then she felt warmth against her leg and looked down to see Charlie, still sleeping beside her, his injured paw carefully tucked under his body. The events of the previous day came rushing back. The clearing, the pills, the injured dog who had led her here, the story of Marcus Harrison. Emma stretched carefully, trying not to disturb Charlie. He stirred anyway, amber eyes opening to regard her with what seemed like relief, as if he'd been afraid she might disappear during the night. "Good morning," Emma said softly. Charlie's tail thumped against the floor in response. "We should probably get you some food and proper medical attention." She stood and walked to the cabin's crooked doorway, looking out at the forest. In the morning light, she could see that the cabin was more isolated than she'd realized. Trees surrounded it on all sides with just a narrow path, the one they'd followed last night, visible through the undergrowth. How far was she from the clearing where she'd left her backpack? How far from the hiking trail that led back to civilization? Charlie joined her at the doorway, his limp still pronounced, but his energy seemingly improved after a night's rest. He looked up at Emma expectantly. "I need to get my backpack," she told him. "Do you remember where we were yesterday? By the stream?" As if understanding, Charlie limped out of the cabin and turned toward the path they'd taken the night before. Emma followed, paying closer attention to their surroundings now that daylight made it possible. The forest was beautiful in the morning sun, alive with birdsong and the rustle of small animals in the underbrush. Emma tried to memorize landmarks, an unusually shaped rock, a tree with distinctive bark, to help her find her way back to the cabin later. It took less time than she expected to reach the pond, and from there, Charlie led her confidently back to the clearing where she'd planned to end her life. Her backpack sat undisturbed on the log, looking smaller and less significant than it had yesterday. The journal she'd intended to write her final thoughts in lay open beside it, the page still blank. Emma gathered her things, checking to make sure everything was still there. The water bottle, the remaining food, the first aid kit, and yes, the bottle of pills. She held it for a moment, feeling its weight in her palm, then tucked it into a side pocket of the backpack. Not today, she thought. Maybe not tomorrow either. Right now she had a dog to help. Charlie watched her curiously, sitting at the edge of the clearing. When Emma slung the backpack over her shoulders, he stood, ready to lead the way back to the cabin. "Not yet," Emma said. "We need to get you to a vet." She pulled out her phone, unsurprised to find no signal this deep in the forest. She'd have to hike back to the main trail to call for help. Emma tried to remember how long she'd walked yesterday before finding the clearing. An hour, maybe a little more. That meant at least an hour back to where she'd parked her car, then a drive to the nearest town. "Can you walk that far?" she asked Charlie, eyeing his injured paw. He tilted his head, as if considering the question. "Let's at least clean that wound properly before we try." Emma sat on the log and patted the space beside her. Charlie approached cautiously, allowing her to unwrap the makeshift bandage from the day before. The wound looked slightly better. The bleeding had stopped, but it was still raw and clearly painful. Emma opened her first aid kit and found antiseptic wipes, clean gauze, and athletic tape. "This might sting," she warned as she gently cleaned the area. Charlie flinched but remained still, watching her work with trusting eyes. Emma applied a layer of antibiotic ointment before rewrapping the paw with fresh gauze and securing it with the tape. "Not professional, but it should help until we get you to a vet." She offered Charlie some of her remaining food, a granola bar and half an apple, which he accepted eagerly. While he ate, Emma studied her map, trying to determine the quickest route back to the parking area. Once there, she could use her car's GPS to find the nearest veterinary clinic. "Ready?" she asked when Charlie had finished eating. He stood in response, shaking himself before stepping tentatively on his bandaged paw. He limped, but seemed able to walk. "We'll take it slow." They set off through the forest, heading in what Emma hoped was the direction of the main trail. Charlie stayed close beside her, occasionally veering slightly to avoid rough terrain, but generally keeping pace despite his injury. Emma found herself talking to him as they walked, narrating their journey and sharing observations about the forest. It had been so long since she'd spoken aloud to anyone for more than a few necessary sentences. The words felt rusty in her mouth, but gradually came more easily. "I came here yesterday to die," she told Charlie after they'd been walking for about 20 minutes. "I had it all planned out. The location, the method, even what I was going to write in my journal before I did it." Charlie glanced up at her, amber eyes attentive. "It sounds so clinical when I say it out loud. I thought I was being poetic, ending things in a beautiful place. But really, I was just tired. Tired of feeling empty. Tired of pretending I was okay when I wasn't. Tired of missing David." The mention of her fiancé's name brought a familiar ache, but it was duller somehow, less all-consuming than it had been yesterday. He died 10 months ago. Heart attack at 32. No warning signs, no family history. Just here 1 minute, gone the next. The doctors called it a congenital defect that had gone undetected. Emma ducked under a low-hanging branch, holding it aside so Charlie could pass. "We were supposed to get married this summer. Instead, I spent the past year watching my life fall apart in slow motion. I couldn't write anymore. I'm a writer, or I was. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't connect with anyone. It was like I died with him, except my body didn't get the message." Charlie stopped suddenly, ears perked forward. Emma halted beside him, listening. After a moment, she heard what had caught his attention. Voices, distant but distinct, coming from somewhere ahead of them. "People," she said. "We must be near the trail." Charlie hesitated, looking unsure. Emma realized he might not have been around other humans since Marcus died. "It's okay," she assured him. "They'll help us. We need to get you to a vet." They continued forward, moving more cautiously now. Soon Emma spotted the main hiking trail through the trees, and with it, a group of 3 hikers consulting a map. Relief washed over her. Help was within reach. As they approached the trail, however, Charlie grew increasingly nervous, his body tense, ears flattened against his head. When one of the hikers, a tall man with a red backpack, looked in their direction, Charlie balked, backing away into the underbrush. "Charlie, wait!" Emma called, but the dog had already turned and was limping rapidly back the way they had come, disappearing among the trees. Emma stood frozen, caught between following Charlie and continuing toward the hikers who could help her get back to civilization. The rational choice was clear: get to her car, find a vet or animal rescue, come back for Charlie with proper help. Yet the thought of abandoning him injured and alone in the forest made her chest tighten with an emotion she hadn't expected to feel again: concern for something outside herself. The tall hiker noticed her and waved. "Hello there. Are you lost?" Emma looked back at the forest where Charlie had vanished, then at the friendly strangers on the trail. The crossroads before her represented more than just a choice about which direction to walk. It was the first real decision she'd made in months that wasn't influenced by her depression, her grief, her desire to escape her pain. "I need help," she called back, stepping toward the trail. "But not for me." The hikers, 2 men and a woman in their 30s, listened with growing interest as Emma explained about Charlie, his injured paw, and the abandoned cabin. She edited her own story, saying only that she'd been hiking when she encountered the injured dog, omitting the backpack full of pills and her plans from the day before. "Poor thing," said the woman, whose name was Melissa. "His owner died and he's been alone out there for weeks?" Emma nodded, clutching the straps of her backpack. "That's what I gathered from the journal. He needs medical attention, but he's scared of strangers." "No wonder," said the taller man, who had introduced himself as Jeff, "after what he's been through." He consulted his GPS. "The nearest town is Riverdale, about 20 miles east. They have a vet clinic there." "I need to go back for him," Emma said, glancing anxiously at the forest where Charlie had disappeared. "He trusts me. I can't just leave him out there." The third hiker, a bearded man named Chris, shook his head. "You might not find the cabin again without proper navigation. These woods are bigger than they look." Emma bit her lip, realizing he was right. She'd tried to memorize landmarks, but the forest had a repetitive quality that made orientation difficult. "I have to try. He's injured and alone." The 3 hikers exchanged looks. "Tell you what," Jeff said finally. "We've got a satellite phone. We can call the local ranger station, explain the situation. They might be able to send someone to help." Relief flooded through Emma. That would be amazing. While Jeff made the call, Melissa offered Emma a protein bar and some jerky. "For your dog friend when you find him again," she explained, seeing Emma's hesitation. "He's probably hungry." Emma accepted gratefully, suddenly aware of her own hunger. When was the last time she'd eaten a proper meal? She couldn't remember. Jeff returned, looking satisfied. "Ranger station says they'll send someone to meet us at the trailhead. Guy named Steve. He knows these woods well and has experience with wildlife rescue, including domesticated animals. They've been getting reports of a stray dog in the area for weeks, but haven't been able to locate it." "How far to the trailhead?" Emma asked. "About 2 miles that way," Chris said, pointing north along the path. "Easy hiking." Emma hesitated, glancing back toward where Charlie had disappeared. "I told him I'd help him, I promised." Melissa placed a hand on Emma's arm. "The best way to help him is to bring back proper assistance. Going alone might just lead to you getting lost too." Reluctantly, Emma nodded. The rational part of her knew Melissa was right, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was betraying Charlie's trust. She had come to the forest to end her life, not caring what happened afterward. Now suddenly keeping a promise to a stray dog seemed like the most important thing in the world. The hike to the trailhead took less than an hour. Emma was grateful for the company, though her mind kept returning to Charlie alone in the forest with his injured paw. The hikers kept the conversation light, sensing her preoccupation. They reached the parking area just as a Forest Service truck pulled up, a stocky man with a salt and pepper beard stepping out. "You the folks who called about the stray?" he asked, approaching them. Jeff nodded, gesturing toward Emma. "She's the one who found him." Ranger Steve turned kind eyes to Emma. "Tell me everything. Location, condition of the animal, behavior." Emma described her encounter with Charlie in detail, the cabin's location as best she could remember it, and Charlie's injured paw. She showed him her map, trying to mark where she thought the cabin might be. "Sounds like old Marcus Harrison's place," Steve said, surprising her. "Local legend around here. Former doctor who went off-grid after some personal tragedy. Folks in town used to hike supplies into him once a month. Last time anyone saw him was about 2 months ago." "You knew him?" Emma asked. Steve shook his head. "Of him. Kept to himself mostly. Nice enough when you ran into him, though. Always had that golden retriever with him." He studied Emma's map. "I know roughly where his cabin is. If your dog friend went back there, we might be able to find him." "He's not my dog," Emma corrected automatically, then paused. The words felt wrong somehow, as if she was disavowing a connection that had formed despite her intentions. "I mean, I just met him yesterday, but I promised I'd help him." Steve nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Tell you what, I've got some equipment in the truck that might help. Dog treats, a gentle trap if we need it, first aid supplies. You up for a hike back in? Having someone he trusts might make things easier." Emma glanced at her car, parked a few spaces away. The sensible thing would be to go home, to resume her life, or what was left of it. The encounter with Charlie could be just a strange interlude, a story to tell someday. "Once I went into the forest to kill myself and ended up rescuing a dog instead. But the thought of going home to her empty apartment, to the silence and the memories, made her chest tighten with dread. And the idea of abandoning Charlie, of breaking the first promise she'd made to anyone in months, was unthinkable. "Yes," she said firmly, "I'm coming with you." After thanking the hikers and exchanging contact information with Melissa, who extracted a promise that Emma would let her know what happened with Charlie, Emma climbed into Ranger Steve's truck. They drove to a service road that penetrated deeper into the forest, cutting a significant portion off their journey on foot. "Been doing this job for 20 years, Steve said as they drove. "Seen all kinds of things in these woods. People come here searching for something. Peace, adventure, escape. Sometimes they find what they're looking for. Sometimes they find something else entirely." Emma glanced at him, wondering if he could somehow sense her original purpose in coming to the forest. But his expression was open, his attention on the rough road ahead. "What do you think happens to pets when their owners die?" Emma asked suddenly. "Do they understand? Do they grieve?" Steve considered the question seriously. "Animals experience loss differently than we do, but yes, they grieve. Dogs especially. They form deep bonds with their people. When that person disappears, they feel it. Some wait for their owners to return. Some search for them. Some just know somehow that their person is gone. And then what? Then they do what all living things do when faced with loss. They adapt. They survive. And if they're lucky, they find someone new to care for them." He glanced at her. "Sounds like your Charlie is a survivor." They parked where the service road ended and continued on foot, Steve consulting both Emma's map and his own knowledge of the area. The forest felt different with a guide, less mysterious, more navigable. Steve pointed out landmarks and signs of wildlife Emma would have missed on her own. After about 40 minutes of hiking, they came to the small pond Charlie had shown Emma the day before. Her heart quickened with recognition. "We're close," she said. "The cabin is just past here." As they approached the clearing where the cabin stood, Steve motioned for Emma to go ahead. "He knows you. Better if you approach first." Emma nodded and walked slowly toward the dilapidated structure. "Charlie?" she called softly. "It's me, Emma. I came back just like I promised." For a long moment there was no response. Emma's heart sank. Had he left? Gone deeper into the forest where she couldn't find him? Then, a rustle from inside the cabin, and Charlie appeared in the doorway, his amber eyes wary, but his tail giving a tentative wag when he saw her. "Hey, buddy," Emma said, her voice catching with unexpected emotion. "I brought help." Charlie limped toward Emma, stopping a few feet away, his gaze shifting between her and Ranger Steve, who had remained at a respectful distance. Emma crouched down, holding out her hand. "It's okay," she said softly. "He's here to help us." Charlie approached cautiously, sniffing her outstretched fingers before allowing her to stroke his head. Emma offered him a piece of the jerky Melissa had given her, which he accepted gently. "That's a good sign," Steve said quietly. "He's hungry but not desperate enough to snatch food. Shows he still trusts humans." Emma continued petting Charlie, examining his injured paw. The bandage she'd applied earlier was dirty, but still in place. "What do we do now?" she asked. "First, I'd like to check the cabin," Steve replied. "If Marcus Harrison passed away in there, we need to report it to the proper authorities." Emma nodded, remembering the journal's final entry. He mentioned being ill, in pain, said his medicine was running out. Steve approached slowly, letting Charlie see and smell him before kneeling to offer a treat from his pocket. The dog accepted it cautiously, but didn't retreat. "Let's have a look at that paw, fella," Steve murmured, gently examining the bandaged limb. "Amateur but effective," he said to Emma with approval. "Looks like you got the glass out clean. I've got a better first aid kit in my pack, though." While Steve rebandaged Charlie's paw with proper veterinary supplies, Emma ventured into the cabin. In daylight, the small space revealed more details she'd missed the night before. Beside Marcus's journal, she found several books on local flora and fauna, a collection of hand-carved wooden figures, and a small box containing photographs. Most showed an older Marcus with Charlie as a puppy and young dog, but some included a younger Marcus with a woman and a little girl. "Found anything?" Steve asked, appearing in the doorway with Charlie. Emma held up the journal. "Just this, and some personal effects. No body." Steve nodded, glancing around. He may have left the cabin when he felt the end coming. Some people prefer to die under the open sky. The thought brought an unexpected lump to Emma's throat. She'd come to the forest seeking a similar end, not alone in her apartment where neighbors might find her days later, but in nature with some final beauty to ease her passage. "What happens to Charlie now?" she asked. "We take him to the vet in Riverdale to get checked out. After that, it depends. If we can find any of Marcus's family, they might want him. Otherwise, he'll go to a shelter." "A shelter?" Emma repeated, dismayed. "But he's used to being out here in the open. And after losing Marcus..." Steve's expression was sympathetic but firm. "He can't survive out here alone, especially injured. Winter's coming in a few months. Food will get scarce." Emma looked at Charlie, who had settled on his blanket nest, watching them with those intelligent amber eyes. The thought of him in a shelter cage, confused and grieving, was unbearable. Before she could question her impulse, the words tumbled out. "I'll take him." Steve raised an eyebrow. "That's a big commitment. Dogs need..." "I know what dogs need," Emma interrupted. "Food, shelter, exercise, medical care, commitment. I can provide those things." She hesitated, then added more quietly, "And I think maybe we need each other." Steve studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Let's get him checked out by the vet first. Make sure there aren't any health issues you should know about. Then we can talk about adoption. The word adoption sent a flutter of anxiety through Emma. 24 hours ago, she'd been planning to end her life. Now she was contemplating adopting a dog, taking responsibility for another living being. The shift was so sudden, so complete that it left her dizzy. We should gather some of his things, Steve suggested, gesturing around the cabin. His blanket, toys. Familiar objects will help him adjust to a new environment. Emma nodded, grateful for the practical task. She collected Charlie's few possessions: the faded blue water bowl, the chewed tennis ball, the frayed rope toy, and the least dirty of his blankets. After a moment's hesitation, she also took the framed photograph of Marcus and Charlie and the small wooden box of photos. "What about Marcus's other belongings?" she asked. "I'll notify the rangers and local authorities," Steve replied. "They'll send someone to collect anything that might help identify next of kin." As they prepared to leave, Emma found herself reluctant to abandon the cabin. Despite its dilapidated state, it had been a home to Marcus and Charlie, a place where they'd found peace and companionship in their isolation. She took one last look around, her gaze lingering on the crude shelf, the wood stove, the nest of blankets. So little, yet it had been enough. "Ready?" Steve asked from the doorway. Emma nodded, picking up the small bundle of Charlie's possessions. "Come on, Charlie," she called softly. "We're going to get your paw fixed up." To her surprise, Charlie rose immediately and limped to her side, as if he understood exactly what she was saying. Together, they left the cabin, following Steve back through the forest toward his truck. The hike out was slower than the journey in, as they had to pace themselves to accommodate Charlie's injury. The dog stayed close to Emma, occasionally pressing against her leg as if seeking reassurance. Each time he did, she found herself reaching down to touch his head, a gesture that comforted them both. "Has he always been this trusting?" Steve asked as they walked. "Most strays that have been alone this long are more skittish." Emma shook her head. "He approached me yesterday when I was..." She paused, unsure how much to reveal. "When I was sitting by the stream. He was cautious at first, but not afraid. Golden retrievers are generally good with people, but this level of trust after trauma is unusual. You must have a way with animals." Emma almost laughed. She'd never considered herself particularly good with animals. David had wanted a dog, but their apartment building didn't allow pets. After his death, she'd barely been able to take care of herself, let alone contemplate caring for another living being. Yet here she was, walking through the forest with a stray dog who had, in less than 24 hours, completely altered the trajectory of her life. They reached the truck without incident, Steve creating a comfortable space in the back seat with an old blanket he kept for emergencies. Charlie hesitated at the vehicle's door, looking up at Emma with uncertainty. "It's okay," she assured him, patting the seat. "We're going to get your paw fixed, then find you a proper home." After a moment's consideration, Charlie jumped awkwardly into the truck, settling on the blanket with a soft sigh. Emma climbed in beside him, keeping a reassuring hand on his back as Steve started the engine. The drive to Riverdale took about 40 minutes, during which Charlie gradually relaxed, eventually resting his head on Emma's lap. She stroked his dirty fur, thinking about what lay ahead. She'd need to call her landlord, see if pets were allowed. If not, she'd have to find a new apartment. She'd need to buy dog food, a proper bed, a leash and collar. She'd need to register him, get him vaccinated, possibly trained. The logistics were overwhelming, but instead of paralyzing her as such challenges might have done yesterday, they energized her. Each item on the mental list represented a step forward, a reason to continue, a responsibility to fulfill. Riverdale Animal Hospital is just up ahead, Steve announced, turning onto a tree-lined street. "Dr. Mitchell is expecting us. She's good with rescue cases." Emma glanced down at Charlie, who was watching the passing scenery with alert interest. "Hear that, buddy? We're getting you some professional help." Charlie looked up at her, his amber eyes warm with what seemed like gratitude, and Emma felt something stir within her chest, something she'd thought had died with David. Not happiness exactly, but a quiet determination, a reason to see what tomorrow might bring. Riverdale Animal Hospital was a single-story brick building with cheerful paw prints painted on the windows. As Steve parked, Emma felt a flutter of anxiety. What if Charlie's injuries were worse than they appeared? What if he had some chronic condition that required expensive medication? What if the vet insisted he go to a shelter? "Don't worry," Steve said, noticing her expression. "Dr. Mitchell's one of the best. She'll take good care of him." Emma nodded, gathering Charlie's few possessions while Steve came around to help the dog out of the truck. Charlie hesitated at the hospital entrance, his body tensing as the antiseptic smell reached his sensitive nose. "It's okay," Emma murmured, kneeling beside him. "I know it's scary, but they're going to help you." A receptionist greeted them warmly, eyes widening slightly at Charlie's bedraggled appearance. "This must be our forest rescue. Dr. Mitchell is ready for you in exam room 3. Dr. Mitchell was a woman in her early 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She greeted Steve with the familiarity of old acquaintance before turning her attention to Charlie and Emma. "So this is our wilderness survivor," she said, crouching to Charlie's level. "Let's have a look at you, young man." The examination was thorough. Dr. Mitchell checked Charlie's injured paw first, cleaning it properly and applying a professional bandage. "Good work with the initial first aid," she told Emma. "You removed the glass cleanly, no fragments left behind." She proceeded to check Charlie's overall condition, examining his ears, eyes, teeth, and coat. "He's underweight, but not critically so. Dehydrated, which we can address with fluids. Some minor skin issues from living rough, but nothing serious. I'd estimate he's about 4 years old." "No microchip?" Steve asked. Dr. Mitchell shook her head. "I've scanned him thoroughly. No chip." "What about his paw?" Emma asked. "Will it heal properly?" "The laceration is deep but clean. With proper care, keeping it clean, limited activity for a week or 2, it should heal with minimal scarring. He's lucky you found him when you did. Untreated, it could have become infected." Relief washed over Emma. Charlie would recover. His physical wounds, at least, would heal. "Now, let's discuss next steps," Dr. Mitchell continued, jotting notes in Charlie's newly created chart. "He needs vaccines, a proper flea and tick treatment, and ideally, neutering if he isn't already. I'm assuming from Ranger Steve's call that you're considering adoption?" The question, asked so directly, made Emma hesitate. Yesterday, she'd been ready to leave life behind entirely. Today, she was contemplating taking responsibility for another living being. The contrast was jarring, but looking at Charlie, who watched her with those trusting amber eyes, she found herself nodding. "Yes, I want to adopt him." Dr. Mitchell smiled. "Excellent. There's paperwork, of course. Normally, we'd need to verify the dog truly is abandoned or surrendered, but given the circumstances Steve described about the owner's passing, we can proceed with a simplified process." Emma listened as Dr. Mitchell outlined the immediate care Charlie would need: antibiotics for his paw, a special diet to help him regain weight safely, regular checkups to monitor his recovery. The vet also recommended a professional grooming once his paw had healed sufficiently. "He'll need time to adjust to domestic life again," Dr. Mitchell cautioned. "Even though he was once a pet, he's been living wild for weeks. Be patient with him." Steve, who had been quiet during the examination, spoke up. "I've got contacts at the local shelter. They often have starter kits for new adoptions. Basic supplies to get you through the first few days. Emma thanked him, suddenly overwhelmed by the practicalities ahead. She'd need to drive back to her apartment, prepare a space for Charlie, figure out how to incorporate him into a life she'd been planning to abandon. The thought was both daunting and, unexpectedly, energizing. "Can I take him home today?" she asked. Dr. Mitchell nodded. "I'd like to keep him for a few hours for fluids and observation, but you could pick him up this evening. Where are you staying locally?" Emma realized she hadn't thought that far ahead. I'm not sure. My car is still at the trailhead." "There's a pet-friendly motel just down the street," Steve offered. "I can drive you back to your car, then you can follow me back to town. That would give you time to pick up some supplies before collecting Charlie later." The plan made sense. Emma knelt beside Charlie, who had remained remarkably calm throughout the examination. "I'll be back for you tonight," she promised, stroking his head. "You rest and let Dr. Mitchell take care of you." Charlie leaned against her hand, his eyes never leaving her face. The connection between them, formed in less than a day, felt inexplicably strong, as if they recognized something in each other, some shared experience of loss and survival. After completing the initial adoption paperwork and settling Charlie's medical bill, which Steve insisted on partially covering through a wildlife rescue fund, Emma reluctantly left Charlie in Dr. Mitchell's capable hands. The dog watched her go with an expression that tugged at her heart, but didn't resist when a veterinary assistant gently led him toward the treatment area. "He'll be fine," Steve assured her as they walked to his truck. "Let's get you sorted out now." The drive back to the trailhead was quiet, Emma lost in thoughts about the dramatic turn her life had taken in less than 24 hours. When they arrived at her car, Steve gave her directions to the Riverdale Motel and the local pet supply store. "Thank you," Emma said sincerely as she prepared to follow him back to town. "For everything. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't helped us." Steve smiled. "Just doing my job, but I'm glad it worked out this way. Charlie seems like a special dog, and you two appear to have bonded already." Emma nodded, unable to articulate the strange, profound connection she felt to the golden retriever she'd met just yesterday. How could she explain that his appearance in the clearing had quite literally changed the course of her life? Following Steve's truck into Riverdale, Emma felt a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced in months. The town was small but charming, with a main street lined with local businesses and restaurants. Steve pointed out the pet store before leading her to the motel, a modest but clean-looking establishment with a neon Pets Welcome sign in the window. After checking in and depositing her backpack in the simple room, Emma headed to the pet store. She found herself oddly excited as she selected items for Charlie: a proper leash and collar, a comfortable bed, food and water bowls, high-quality dog food recommended for recovery, and a few toys. The shop owner, a friendly woman named Grace, offered advice and added a few extras to Emma's basket when she explained the situation. "Rescue dogs need extra love," Grace said with a warm smile. "That first night in a new place can be scary for them. A stuffed toy can help, something soft to cuddle with." Emma selected a plush bear, imagining Charlie curled up with it on the bed she'd bought. The image brought an unexpected smile to her face, the first genuine smile in longer than she could remember. By late afternoon, she had transformed her motel room into a temporary home for Charlie, with his new bed placed beside hers, food and water bowls set up in the small kitchenette area, and his blanket from the cabin laid out to provide a familiar scent. She'd even found time to shower and change into clean clothes purchased from a small boutique next to the pet store, her dirty hiking clothes discarded in the motel's laundry room. As the time approached to pick up Charlie, Emma felt a curious mix of anticipation and nervousness. Was she really ready for this responsibility? Could she actually follow through? Or would the darkness that had driven her to the forest yesterday eventually return, leaving Charlie abandoned once again? Standing in the motel room, surrounded by dog supplies, Emma took a deep breath. One day at a time, she told herself. Today she would bring Charlie home. Tomorrow they would figure out the next step together. With newfound determination, she picked up Charlie's new leash and collar and headed for her car. Whatever doubts she had, one thing was certain. She had made a promise to a dog who had lost everything, and she intended to keep it. When Emma arrived at the animal hospital, Charlie was waiting in a clean, quiet room, his fur noticeably less matted and his injured paw sporting a professional bandage. A veterinary assistant was sitting with him, gently stroking his head. The moment Charlie saw Emma, his entire demeanor changed. His tail began to wag, his ears perked up, and he struggled to stand. "He's been a perfect gentleman," the assistant said, smiling. "But he's been watching the door like he was expecting someone." Emma felt a surge of emotion as she knelt to greet Charlie, who pressed his head against her hands with unmistakable joy. "Hey, buddy, ready to go home?" Dr. Mitchell appeared with discharge instructions and a small bag of medications. "He's had his first round of vaccinations and a thorough flea treatment. I've prescribed antibiotics for his paw and a mild sedative you can give him if he seems overly anxious during the adjustment period. He's eaten well and the fluids have helped with his dehydration." Emma listened carefully as the vet explained the medication schedule and care instructions for Charlie's paw. "Keep the bandage dry. If it gets dirty or wet, come back and we'll replace it. He should limit activity for at least a week. Short, gentle walks only. I'd like to see him again in 3 days to check his progress." "What about bathing him?" Emma asked, eyeing Charlie's still dirty coat. "Wait until his paw is better healed, at least 3 or 4 days. For now, you can use these pet wipes to clean him up a bit." Dr. Mitchell handed her a package of large, moist cloths. "He's been through a lot. Focus on making him feel safe and comfortable first." Emma nodded, slipping the new collar around Charlie's neck. It was a deep blue that complemented his golden fur, with a small silver tag that already bore his name and Emma's cell phone number, a service the pet store had provided. "What do you think?" she asked Charlie, showing him his reflection in a nearby glass cabinet. The dog tilted his head, seeming to consider his new accessory with dignified acceptance. Dr. Mitchell laughed. "He's got personality, that's for sure. Most dogs wouldn't care about their reflection." After settling the bill and thanking the staff, Emma led Charlie to her car. He hesitated briefly at the vehicle, just as he had at Steve's truck, but with gentle encouragement, he jumped into the back seat where Emma had laid out his blanket from the cabin. The drive to the motel was short, but Emma found herself constantly checking the rearview mirror to make sure Charlie was okay. He sat alertly in the back, watching the town pass by with evident interest. "You'll like the room," Emma told him. "I got you a proper bed, some food, toys. It's not much, but it's comfortable." Talking to Charlie felt natural, even though she'd never been much of a pet person before. His attentive gaze made her feel listened to in a way she hadn't experienced in months. Since David's death, conversations had become something to endure, full of platitudes about time healing wounds or awkward silences when people didn't know what to say to a grieving fiancé. With Charlie, there was no expectation of a specific response, no judgment, just quiet attention. At the motel, Charlie followed Emma to their room with dignified caution, pausing to sniff doorways and examine the unfamiliar surroundings. When Emma opened their door, he hesitated on the threshold, looking up at her as if seeking permission. "Go ahead," she encouraged. "It's okay." Charlie stepped inside and immediately began a methodical exploration of the room, sniffing each corner, examining the furniture, and investigating the bathroom. Emma watched with amusement as he conducted his inspection, finally approaching his new bed with particular interest. He sniffed it thoroughly, then looked at Emma. "That's yours," she told him. Do you like it?" As if understanding, Charlie stepped onto the plush surface, turned in a circle twice, and settled down with a contented sigh. The simple pleasure he took in the comfortable bed brought an unexpected lump to Emma's throat. How long had he been sleeping on the hard cabin floor, alone and grieving for his owner? "You're safe now," she said softly, kneeling beside him. "I promise." Charlie's amber eyes held hers, and he shifted to rest his head on her knee. The gesture, so trusting and affectionate, made Emma's eyes fill with tears. She stroked his head gently, feeling the dirt and tangles in his fur. Though the vet had cleaned him up somewhat, he still needed a proper grooming once his paw healed. Emma spent the next hour carefully cleaning Charlie with the pet wipes Dr. Mitchell had provided, talking to him softly as she worked. He remained still under her ministrations, only occasionally shifting position when she reached a particularly sensitive spot. By the time she finished, his fur looked noticeably cleaner, though still far from the glossy golden coat he must have had when Marcus was caring for him. "Hungry?" she asked, and Charlie's ears perked up at the word. Emma smiled, preparing his dinner according to Dr. Mitchell's instructions. A measured portion of the special recovery food mixed with a small amount of warm water to enhance the aroma and make it easier to digest. Charlie ate with careful enthusiasm, not rushing, but clearly appreciating the meal. When he finished, he looked up at Emma expectantly. "You need your medicine now," she told him, retrieving the antibiotics from her bag. Dr. Mitchell had shown her how to conceal the pill in a small piece of cheese, a trick that worked perfectly. Charlie accepted the treated cheese without hesitation, swallowing the pill along with it. Evening had fallen, and Emma realized she hadn't eaten since the protein bar Melissa had given her that morning. She ordered delivery from a local diner, and when the food arrived, Charlie watched with polite interest as she ate her burger and fries. "Sorry, buddy," she said, noticing his gaze. "Not for dogs, especially not for dogs recovering from dehydration and malnutrition." After dinner, Emma prepared for bed, the routine strangely comforting after the upheaval of the past 2 days. Charlie settled on his new bed, the plush bear Grace had recommended tucked against his side. Emma turned out the lights and climbed into her own bed, listening to Charlie's steady breathing in the darkness. Sleep didn't come easily. Now that the immediate concern of helping Charlie had been addressed, Emma's mind returned to the reason she'd gone to the forest in the first place. The bottle of pills was still in her backpack, a reminder of how close she'd come to ending everything. If Charlie hadn't appeared in that clearing... A soft whimper interrupted her thoughts. Charlie was twitching in his sleep, making small, distressed noises. A dream, Emma realized, or more likely a nightmare. Without hesitation, she slipped out of bed and knelt beside him, stroking his head gently. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're safe. I'm here." Charlie's eyes opened, disoriented for a moment before focusing on Emma's face. The relief in his expression was unmistakable. He shifted, making room on his large bed in clear invitation. Emma hesitated only briefly before settling beside him, her back against the wall, legs stretched out. Charlie immediately laid his head on her lap, his warm weight anchoring her to the present moment. She continued stroking his fur, feeling his body gradually relax as he drifted back to sleep. Looking down at the dog who had so unexpectedly entered her life, Emma felt a strange sense of purpose. Charlie needed her. He'd lost his person, his home, his sense of security. He was wounded, physically and emotionally, but he was still trying, still trusting, still moving forward. Maybe she could learn something from that. Outside the motel window, stars appeared in the clear night sky. Emma remembered how she'd planned to take the pills as the sun set, giving herself one last sunset. Instead, she'd spent the day helping a dog who had, in some inexplicable way, helped her in return. One day, she thought. I've managed one day. Maybe I can manage another. With that thought, Emma closed her eyes, her hand still resting on Charlie's golden head, and drifted into the first peaceful sleep she'd had in months. Morning sunlight filtered through the motel curtains, waking Emma from a deep sleep. For a moment, she was disoriented, the unfamiliar room causing a brief flutter of panic. Then she felt Charlie's warm weight against her side, his head still resting on her lap, where she'd settled to comfort him during the night. The events of the past 2 days rushed back. The forest, the pills, the injured dog who had changed everything. Charlie stirred, lifting his head to look at her with sleepy amber eyes. "Good morning," Emma said softly, surprised at how rested she felt, despite sleeping in such an awkward position. Charlie responded with a gentle tail wag, wincing slightly as he shifted to accommodate his injured paw. "Let's check that bandage," Emma said, carefully examining Dr. Mitchell's handiwork. The white gauze was still clean and securely wrapped. "Looks good. How about some breakfast?" At the word breakfast, Charlie's ears perked up, his tail wagging more enthusiastically. Emma smiled, easing herself off his bed to prepare his morning meal and medication. While Charlie ate, she took a quick shower, planning their day as warm water washed over her. They needed to figure out their next steps. Emma's apartment in the city was small, and she wasn't sure if her building allowed pets. She'd have to call her landlord. She'd need to buy more supplies than what would fit in her compact car. And eventually, she'd need to decide whether to return to work or find something new. The thought of returning to her old life, of resuming her job at the publishing house, felt strange now. That life belonged to a different Emma, one who had gradually disconnected from everything that mattered, who had methodically planned her own end. The Emma who emerged from the shower, drying her hair while watching Charlie finish his breakfast, was someone new. Not healed, not whole, but different. Changed. After dressing and taking Charlie for a short, gentle walk in the grassy area behind the motel, Emma settled at the small desk with her phone. The list of calls she needed to make was daunting, but she started with the most pressing, her landlord. Pets? In that tiny apartment? Mrs. Patel's voice carried a note of skepticism. "What kind of pet are we talking about?" "A dog," Emma replied. "A golden retriever. He's well behaved and—" "A large dog? Absolutely not. The building policy is clear. Cats only, and even those require an additional deposit." Emma's heart sank. She'd anticipated this response, but hearing it confirmed made her stomach tighten with anxiety. She glanced at Charlie, who had settled on his bed again, watching her with those intelligent eyes. "I understand," she said finally. "In that case, I'll need to give notice. I'll be moving out." After ending the call, Emma sat in silence, the magnitude of her decision sinking in. She'd just committed to leaving her apartment of 3 years for a dog she'd met 2 days ago. It should have felt reckless, impulsive. Instead, it felt right. The first decision in months that seemed to move her towards something rather than away from everything. Her next call was to her brother, Thomas. They hadn't spoken much since David's funeral, her withdrawal having created a distance that neither knew how to bridge. The phone rang 4 times before he answered, his voice cautious. "Emma? Is everything okay?" The concern in his tone made her realize how rare her calls had become, rare enough that hearing from her signaled potential emergency. "I'm fine," she assured him quickly. "Actually, I've adopted a dog." The silence on the other end spoke volumes. "A dog?" Thomas finally repeated, as if he hadn't heard correctly. "His name is Charlie. He's a golden retriever. I found him in the forest, injured and alone. His owner had died, and he'd been fending for himself for weeks." The words tumbled out, Emma suddenly eager to share Charlie's story, and by extension, her own. "Wait, back up," Thomas said. "You were in the forest? When?" Emma hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. A couple of days ago, I went hiking and found him. It's a long story, but he needed help, and now I'm his person, I guess. His person, Thomas repeated, a note of wonder in his voice. Emma, that's great. Unexpected, but great. My apartment doesn't allow dogs, so I'm looking for a new place. I thought maybe you might know of something available in your area. Thomas lived in a suburb about 30 miles from Emma's city apartment, in a neighborhood with small houses and fenced yards. Actually, Thomas said slowly, Mrs. Abernathy next door is moving to Florida to live with her daughter. Her house is going up for rent next month. It's small, but it has a decent yard. Want me to ask her about it? Relief washed over Emma. That would be amazing, thank you. No problem. So, when do I get to meet Charlie? The question took Emma by surprise. She and Thomas had seen each other only twice in the 10 months since David's death. Both times brief, awkward encounters where neither knew what to say. You want to meet him? Of course I do. He's family now, right? Plus, I could show you Mrs. Abernathy's place if you're interested. We're staying in Riverdale right now, a couple hours from you. Charlie has a vet appointment tomorrow, but maybe after that? The words felt surreal. 3 days ago, Emma had been meticulously disconnecting from life. Now she was making plans, looking at houses, arranging family visits. Perfect. Text me when you're heading this way, and I'll make sure I'm home. After ending the call, Emma sat in thoughtful silence. The conversation with her brother had been the most normal interaction they'd had since David died. Somehow, having Charlie to talk about had bypassed the awkwardness, the careful avoidance of difficult topics that had characterized their recent relationship. Charlie shifted on his bed, his amber eyes watching her attentively. Looks like we might have a house with a yard soon, Emma told him, and you're going to meet my brother. The dog's tail thumped against his bed, as if he understood and approved of these developments. Emma smiled, reaching for the pet store bag. She'd bought a brush yesterday, anticipating the eventual need to groom Charlie's tangled coat. Though Dr. Mitchell had advised waiting for a full bath, gentle brushing would help in the meantime. Come here, she called, patting the space beside her. Charlie limped over, settling on the carpet near her chair. Emma started brushing him carefully, talking softly as she worked through the tangles in his golden fur. You're going to look so handsome when we're done. Thomas will be impressed. As she brushed, Emma found herself telling Charlie about her brother, about their childhood, about how close they'd been before distance and careers had pulled them in different directions. She told him about David, too, how they'd met at a publishing event, how he'd proposed on a rainy Sunday morning over pancakes, how his death had blindsided her completely. I thought I'd never feel anything again except grief, she admitted, working gently at a particularly stubborn tangle. It was like all the color drained out of the world when he died. Everything was just gray, empty. Charlie leaned against her leg, his warm presence comforting as she spoke of things she'd kept locked inside for months. There was something cathartic about saying the words aloud, about acknowledging the depth of her pain to this silent, accepting witness. I still miss him, she continued, her brush strokes steady and rhythmic. I think I always will. But when I saw you in that clearing, when you needed help, it was the first time since David died that I felt something besides grief. You reminded me that there's still life, still connection, still reasons to stay. Charlie turned his head to look at her, amber eyes meeting hers with an expression so full of understanding that Emma's throat tightened with emotion. He nudged her hand with his nose, a gesture that seemed to say, I know, me too. Emma set down the brush and wrapped her arms around Charlie's neck, burying her face in his now softer fur. Thank you, she whispered, for finding me when I needed to be found. Later, as they walked slowly around the motel grounds, careful of Charlie's injured paw, Emma felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in nearly a year. The future still held challenges: finding a home, rebuilding her life, continuing to navigate her grief. But for the first time, she was looking forward rather than back, and she wasn't alone. Charlie walked beside her, his presence a steady reminder that sometimes salvation comes in unexpected forms, even a wounded stray dog in a forest clearing. The next morning, Emma and Charlie returned to Dr. Mitchell's office for his follow-up appointment. 3 days of proper nutrition, medication, and rest had already made a noticeable difference in the golden retriever's appearance and energy. His eyes were brighter, his movements more fluid, and the tense vigilance that had characterized him in the forest had softened into a more relaxed alertness. "He's healing nicely," Dr. Mitchell said, examining Charlie's paw. "The wound is clean, no signs of infection, and he's already gained 2 pounds, which is excellent progress." Emma felt a surge of pride, as if Charlie's improvement were a personal accomplishment. In a way, it was. Each meal prepared according to the vet's instructions, each medication administered on schedule, each gentle walk around the motel grounds represented her commitment to this new responsibility. "When can I give him a proper bath?" Emma asked, eyeing Charlie's still dingy coat. Though the brushing had helped remove tangles and some of the surface dirt, he was far from the gleaming golden retriever in Marcus's photograph. "I think we can change to a waterproof bandage today," Dr. Mitchell replied, already reaching for supplies. "With that, you can bathe him as long as you're careful with the injured paw. Just don't soak it, and dry it thoroughly afterward." As they left the animal hospital with Charlie sporting a bright blue waterproof bandage, Emma felt a growing sense of anticipation about their visit to Thomas. She hadn't seen her brother's house in months, having declined numerous invitations during her withdrawal from social connections. Now, she found herself looking forward to the familiar neighborhood, to seeing Thomas, to showing him the remarkable dog who had changed the trajectory of her life. Back at the motel, Emma gave Charlie the bath she'd been eager to provide since finding him in the forest. The motel's bathroom was small, but she managed to coax him into the tub, speaking soothingly as she wet his fur and applied the gentle shampoo recommended by Dr. Mitchell. Charlie stood stoically, tolerating the process with dignity, though he seemed relieved when it was over, and Emma wrapped him in towels. "Look at you," Emma marveled as she dried him. The dirt and grime of his weeks alone in the forest washed away to reveal a coat of deep golden hue, exactly like the dog in Marcus's photograph. "You're beautiful, Charlie." After the bath, as Emma packed their few belongings, her hand brushed against the bottle of pills still tucked in the side pocket of her backpack. She'd almost forgotten about them, the purpose that had driven her to the forest, seemingly belonging to another lifetime now. Emma held the bottle for a long moment, remembering the emptiness, the gray fog that had enveloped her for months after David's death. The fog hadn't lifted entirely. There were still moments when grief pressed down on her like a physical weight. But now there was Charlie, his needs providing structure to her days, his companionship offering comfort during difficult moments. With deliberate movements, Emma dropped the bottle into the motel room's trash can, covering it with discarded pet supply packaging. The drive to Thomas's house took just over 2 hours. Charlie sat calmly in the back seat, occasionally looking out the window with interest but mostly content to rest, his chin on the edge of the seat. Emma found herself talking to him throughout the journey, pointing out landmarks, sharing memories of the areas they passed through, playing the radio and noting which songs seemed to capture his attention. "My brother Thomas is a good person," she told Charlie as they neared the suburb where Thomas lived. "He tried to help after David died, but I shut everyone out. It wasn't his fault. I just couldn't bear to see the pity in people's eyes, to hear the platitudes about time healing all wounds." Charlie's ears perked up at her serious tone, his amber eyes watching her in the rearview mirror. "He might be a bit awkward at first," Emma continued. "It's been a while since we've really talked, but I think you'll like him, and I know he'll like you." Thomas's house was a modest two-story in a quiet neighborhood of similar homes, with mature trees lining the street and neatly maintained yards. As Emma parked in the driveway, the front door opened, and Thomas stepped onto the porch. He looked exactly as Emma remembered, tall and lanky like their father, with the same serious eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "You made it," he called, walking toward the car. Then, catching sight of Charlie in the back seat, he smiled. "And this must be the famous Charlie." Emma felt a sudden surge of emotion at seeing her brother, at the genuine warmth in his voice, at the normalcy of the moment that had seemed impossible just days ago. She opened the car door and stepped out, surprised when Thomas immediately enveloped her in a hug. "It's good to see you, Em," he said quietly. "Really good." Emma returned the hug, blinking back unexpected tears. "You too, Tom." When they separated, both a bit embarrassed by the display of emotion, Emma opened the back door for Charlie. "Come on, buddy, meet Uncle Thomas." Charlie stepped carefully from the car, his injured paw held slightly above the ground despite the bandage. He approached Thomas with dignified interest, sniffing the hand extended to him before allowing Thomas to stroke his head. "He's magnificent," Thomas said with genuine admiration. "And he was just wandering in the forest when you found him?" Emma nodded, watching the interaction with a sense of pride. His owner had died in a cabin out there. Charlie had been alone for weeks. Thomas shook his head, continuing to pet Charlie. "Poor guy. Lucky he found you." "Or I found him," Emma replied softly, "depending on how you look at it." Something in her tone made Thomas glance up, a question in his eyes, but he didn't press. Instead, he straightened and gestured toward the house next door, a small, well-maintained bungalow with a deep front porch and a fenced backyard. "That's Mrs. Abernathy's place. She's home now if you want to take a look." The house was perfect, compact but not cramped, with hardwood floors, large windows that let in ample natural light, and a kitchen that opened to a cozy living room. The backyard, visible through sliding glass doors, featured a maple tree that would provide shade in summer and a sturdy fence that would give Charlie safe space to explore. "It's available at the end of the month," Mrs. Abernathy explained as they toured the house. She was a spry woman in her 70s with bright eyes and a no-nonsense manner. "My daughter's got a mother-in-law suite all ready for me in Tampa. Sunshine year-round," she says, "though I'll miss the seasons." She glanced down at Charlie, who had been politely investigating each room, his tail wagging gently. "Dogs are fine. Cats too, though I'm more of a dog person myself. Had a golden retriever once years ago. Best dog I ever knew." Emma felt a growing sense of rightness as they walked through the house. She could picture herself here writing at the kitchen table while Charlie dozed in a patch of sunlight, taking walks in the neighborhood, perhaps even planting flowers in the small garden bed beside the porch. "I'd like to rent it," she said decisively when the tour concluded. "If you'll have us." Mrs. Abernathy smiled, bending slightly to pat Charlie's head. "I think you two will take good care of the place. Thomas can help with the paperwork. He's been kind enough to act as my unofficial rental agent." Back at Thomas's house, over coffee and sandwiches, Emma found herself sharing more of Charlie's story, and by extension, her own journey over the past few days. Thomas listened attentively, asking occasional questions but mostly allowing her to speak at her own pace. "I'm thinking of freelancing again," Emma said as they finished lunch. "My old job at the publishing house. I don't think I can go back to that office, those people. Too many memories." Thomas nodded, understanding. "You always did your best work independently anyway, and now you have an assistant." He gestured to Charlie, who had settled comfortably at Emma's feet. "A very demanding assistant," Emma replied with a small smile. "He requires regular walks and treats." The rest of the afternoon passed in quiet conversation, the awkwardness Emma had feared never materializing. As the day waned and she prepared to drive back to the motel in Riverdale, Thomas walked her to her car. "You're different," he observed, helping her load Charlie's supplies into the trunk. "Not completely, but something's shifted." Emma considered this, watching as Charlie explored Thomas's front yard, his nose working busily at interesting scents. "I'm still grieving," she said finally. "I still miss David every day. But now there's something else too. Something to move toward instead of just away from." Thomas nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Charlie." "Not just Charlie," Emma replied. "Life, I guess. Or the possibility of it anyway." 6 months later, Emma sat on the front porch of her rented bungalow, a laptop open on the small table beside her. The late spring air was warm, carrying the scent of the lilacs she'd planted along the fence. In the yard, Charlie romped with Thomas's newly adopted rescue dog, a shepherd mix named Luna, their play carefully monitored by both Emma and her brother, who sat in an Adirondack chair nearby. "Careful of his paw, Luna," Thomas called, though the warning was unnecessary. Charlie's injury had healed months ago, leaving only a faint scar on the pad of his foot, barely visible unless you knew to look for it. Still, Thomas remained protective of the golden retriever who had, in his words, brought Emma back to life. Emma watched the dogs play, Charlie's golden coat gleaming in the sunlight. He'd filled out since those first days, his once protruding ribs now covered with healthy muscle, his fur thick and lustrous. Dr. Mitchell, who had become their regular vet, declared him the picture of canine health at their last checkup. "How's the book coming?" Thomas asked, nodding toward Emma's laptop. "Almost finished," she replied, a note of satisfaction in her voice. The editor's notes were helpful. She thinks it could be ready for publication by the end of summer. The book had been an unexpected development. 3 months after adopting Charlie, Emma had begun writing again, not the commercial fiction she'd produced before David's death, but a memoir about grief, healing, and the dog who had appeared in the forest at her darkest moment. The words had poured out of her, sometimes painful, sometimes healing, always honest. "Marcus's family is okay with being included?" Thomas asked. Emma nodded. After settling into their new home, she'd worked with Ranger Steve to locate Marcus Harrison's relatives. His daughter, a woman in her 40s living in Oregon, had been grateful to learn of her estranged father's final years. She'd shared stories of the brilliant doctor he'd once been, before depression and alcoholism had driven him into isolation. The journals Emma had found in the cabin, along with the wooden carvings and photographs, had been sent to the daughter, who'd been touched by the evident peace her father had found in his forest sanctuary with Charlie. "They're glad his story is being told," Emma said, "and that Charlie found a new home." Charlie, as if hearing his name, looked up from his play with Luna, his amber eyes finding Emma's across the yard. The connection between them, forged in that forest clearing 6 months ago, had only deepened with time. He seemed to sense her moods instinctively, offering quiet companionship during her difficult days and enthusiastic playfulness when her spirits lifted. "He saved my life, you know," Emma said quietly, her eyes still on Charlie. It wasn't the first time she'd made this admission to Thomas, but it felt important to acknowledge it again. "Not metaphorically, literally." Thomas nodded, his expression somber. Over the months, Emma had gradually shared the full truth of that day in the forest, the backpack of pills, the journal she'd intended to write her final thoughts in, the carefully chosen spot where she'd planned to die. Thomas had listened without judgment, though the pain in his eyes had been evident. "I've never asked," he said now, his voice carefully casual. "What made you follow him? When he appeared in the clearing, why didn't you just ignore him, stick to your plan?" Emma considered the question, watching as Charlie gently took a toy from Luna, initiating a game of chase. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "Something in his eyes, maybe. He was wounded, alone, abandoned by circumstances beyond his control, but he was still trying, still moving forward." She paused, searching for the words. I think I recognize something of myself in him, or what I could be if I chose to keep going." Thomas nodded, understanding in his eyes. "You both saved each other then?" "I guess we did." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Melissa, the hiker who had given Emma jerky for Charlie that first day on the trail. She had become a regular visitor and friend, her warmth and easy manner drawing Emma out of her shell. Today, she carried a basket covered with a checkered cloth. "I brought those muffins Charlie loves," she announced, setting the basket on the porch table. "And some human food, too." At the word muffins, Charlie abandoned his play with Luna and trotted to the porch, tail wagging in anticipation. Emma laughed, reaching out to scratch behind his ears. "You have selective hearing, don't you? Only tune in for the important words like muffin and walk and dinner." Charlie's tail wagged faster, his eyes bright with intelligence and what Emma had come to recognize as his particular brand of canine humor. He placed his chin on her knee, a gesture both affectionate and subtly demanding. "Yes, you can have a muffin," Emma conceded, breaking off a small piece of the dog-safe treats Melissa had baked. "One piece now, one later." As Melissa settled into conversation with Thomas, Emma found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here, to this peaceful afternoon surrounded by friends, with Charlie by her side. The grief hadn't disappeared. There were still days when memories of David ambushed her, still nights when she woke reaching for someone who wasn't there. But the crushing emptiness had lifted. Life had color again, texture, meaning. 2 weeks after moving into the bungalow, Emma had visited David's grave for the first time since the funeral. She'd brought Charlie with her, his steady presence a comfort as she'd stood before the granite headstone, tears streaming down her face. "I miss you," she told David, her voice breaking. "I always will. But I'm trying to live again. I think you'd want that." Charlie had sat beside her, leaning against her leg, somehow understanding the gravity of the moment. Later, walking back to the car, Emma had felt a subtle shift within her, not a lessening of love for David, but a tentative acceptance that her life could continue, different but still worth living. Now, watching Melissa and Thomas laughing together, Charlie and Luna playing in the yard, Emma felt a profound gratitude wash over her. She hadn't expected to be here, to be alive to witness this ordinary moment of connection and joy. Had Charlie not appeared in that clearing, had he not led her to the abandoned cabin, had he not trusted her despite his own trauma, her story would have ended 6 months ago, alone in the forest. Instead, she had this: a home, friends, purpose, and the extraordinary dog who had changed everything. "Walk after dinner?" she asked Charlie, who had settled at her feet with his precious muffin. His ears perked up at the magical word, his tail thumping against the porch boards. "I thought so." Later, as the sun began its descent, Emma and Charlie took their usual evening walk through the neighborhood. These walks had become a cornerstone of their routine, a time for Emma to clear her mind and for Charlie to explore the fascinating sense of their territory. They followed a familiar route, greeting neighbors who had come to know them over the months. Near the end of their walk was a small park with a bench overlooking a pond. Emma sat, Charlie settling beside her as they watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. This had become their ritual, A quiet moment of reflection as day turned to evening. "You know what today is?" Emma asked softly, her hand resting on Charlie's head. 6 months since we found each other in the forest. 6 months since you changed everything. Charlie looked up at her, his amber eyes reflecting the sunset's glow. In them, Emma saw what she always did: intelligence, loyalty, and something that in her more whimsical moments she might call wisdom. This dog, who had experienced his own profound loss, who had survived alone in the wilderness, who had somehow found the courage to approach a stranger in his moment of need, had taught her more about resilience than any human ever could. "Thank you," she whispered, leaning down to press her forehead against his. "For finding me, for saving me, for staying." Charlie's response was to lick her cheek once, gently, before returning his gaze to the sunset. Together, they watched as the last brilliant rays disappeared beyond the horizon, the sky deepening to purple, then blue, then the first hints of night. Emma stood ready to head home. "Come on, Charlie. Tomorrow's waiting for us." The golden retriever rose obediently, falling into step beside her as they turned toward home, two survivors walking side by side into the gathering darkness, neither one alone.